Let's get more on this and bring in our Europe correspondent, Dave Keating. Dave, joining us now for more on this situation. Good evening to you, sir. It's always great to have you on board, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about where the EU stands on this. I mean, clearly, if Trump is saying that the US will take Greenland, there is an issue with Denmark, of course, being, well, Greenland is part of Denmark at this present moment in time.
Well, the thing is, obviously, the threats aren't new. As we just heard in that package, Trump has been threatening to annex Greenland, quote, one way or another for a year now. But the threat has taken on sudden urgency, and Europeans are suddenly taking it much more seriously because of the invasion of Venezuela. And of course, as we heard in that package, because of the threats made by the wife of Trump's policy chief, Stephen Miller, where she had the map of Greenland with the US flag over it saying soon. Now, that was followed by comments by Donald Trump I think three different occasions over the past 48 hours, reiterating his interest in taking Greenland. And in comments on Air Force One, he even said that the issue will be dealt with in 2 months. It's not really clear whether he was joking or whether he was serious, but European leaders are taking this very seriously. We had those comments from the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, warning with a, quote, very clear message to the United States to back off. We have the regional Prime Minister of Greenland also saying enough is enough, to stop the fantasy of taking Greenland. But yet the White House does not seem to be backing off on this. Now, we have had statements of support from other European leaders, from Nordic prime ministers, from Keir Starmer saying he stands with the Danish Prime Minister, but none of them are really making it clear. What does that mean? What are they really willing to do to defend Denmark if the United States attacks? And in the more immediate term, what are they willing to do right now to dissuade the United States from taking Greenland by force? For instance, one thing that they could do is take up France's suggestion made a year ago that European troops should be based in Greenland. So French troops, German troops, British troops stationed there in order to deter the United States from invading. In other words, Trump might be okay with killing Danish soldiers in Greenland, but he wouldn't want to take the risk of killing French soldiers, British soldiers, people from nuclear-armed countries. So that may be an idea that European countries are willing to revisit. When France suggested it a year ago, it was shot down by all of these countries, including by Denmark, actually. And also there's other questions about, okay, should there be plans in place for what the EU would do to strike back? Now, Europe can't hope to be able to defeat the United States in a war, obviously, but there could be economic reprisals, sanctions, selling US bonds, which could completely cripple the American economy. There are options there, but none of these leaders are willing to take that extra step and saying exactly what their support for Denmark means.
Does this call into question in some way, Dave, the EU in terms of its collective reaction, its collective strength? And clearly, as you're saying, it's incredibly difficult to handle the fact that someone who once upon a time was your primary ally, it now seems to be going against you in some other way, shape or form. Then, of course, there's always that aspect about NATO calling into question too, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the Europeans are in a very difficult spot here because they are worried that if they anger the United States, that they could do something now that would actually provoke the invasion. If the US invades Greenland, that's the end of NATO, because if Article 5 is triggered involving 2 different NATO members, and one of them is the guarantor of NATO, the guarantor of Europe's security, there goes Europe's security umbrella, and it is vulnerable to invasion from Russia. On the other hand, if they just hand Greenland over to Trump because they're afraid of losing the American security protectorate, then Trump probably isn't satisfied with Greenland. He probably takes more, and he would be emboldened to allow Putin to take more to the east, and Europe could very quickly find itself in a 2-front hostile situation. It's not an easy gamble for the Europeans to make, and I think that's why we're seeing such reticence, not only in criticizing the invasion of Venezuela, but also in actually spelling out in aggressive terms what Europe would do if Trump continues with his threats to invade Greenland. Right now, they're all just kind of in a holding pattern, keeping their heads down, hoping not to anger Donald Trump.
Dave Keating, our Brussels correspondent, thank you very much indeed for the clarity you bring to this story. And we, of course, wait to see what happens next. Dave, once again, thank you.